Welcome to the Greg Bennett Show. I'm your host, Greg Bennett, and today I have a wonderful chat with the very cool, powerful, and versatile triathlete, Ben Kanute. And in this episode, Ben dissects his recent 6th place at the Ironman 70.3 World Championships and his 2021 season as a whole. He then shares his journey into the sport of triathlon, starting at the age of 7, if you can believe it, watching his dad compete in the Chicago Triathlon, and just the incredible triathlon community he was surrounded with. It was always meant to be. Ben discusses the importance of his family and just how grateful he is for finding his wife, Courtney. He shares training and gives plenty of great advice in this one. We have some fun with some rapid fire questions, and Ben points out the importance of time as a commodity. Now, a little bit of housekeeping before we go on. Thank you so much for listening. I truly appreciate it. If you are enjoying the show, you'd be doing me a massive favor if you just share it on your social platforms and get the word out there even a little bit more, and or you can support the show's partners. I hope you enjoy this one as much as I do. And remember, success comes to those who endure just one moment longer. A quick mention of the show's partners. These are all great companies and products that I use daily. If you want to support the show, you'd be doing me a massive favor by supporting these brands. This episode is brought to you by Athletic Brewing. Anyone will tell you that I'm someone who loves to have a beer, and there's always a beer in the fridge for me and or guests that pop in. But with kids, my work, and just my overall health, I can't, and I don't drink often. I can't afford to not be on my game, and I simply don't like the foggy feeling I get by drinking alcohol. So I've tried non-alcoholic beers, but I guess I'm a bit of a beer snob because none of them have measured up to a real craft beer experience that I like. But now with Athletic Brewing, I can have a high quality, just flavorful and award-winning craft beer. And it's only 50 to 70 calories per can. And these beers they fit into any occasion. So I don't have to compromise on my social life or choose between having a great beer and just keeping my clarity. So go ahead and check them out at athleticbrewing.com and use code GREG20 at checkout and receive 20% off your first beer order. And that's athleticbrewing.com, or you can find them at your local liquor store or bottle shop. And I'll let you know, I'll be having one every single episode I record. They're that good. This episode is brought to you by my longtime partner and amazing company and brilliant product, Athletic Greens. I'm using Athletic Greens every day. Great taste, so quick, and ready to go. Athletic Greens is a delicious blend of 75 superfoods and vitamins, minerals, probiotics, and a greens blend and more to support gut health, energy, and immunity and stress. I've also been doubling down on Athletic Greens vitamin D. A huge portion of the population are vitamin D deficient, myself included. And right now, Athletic Greens will give you a year's supply of vitamin D for free and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. Do yourself a favor and sign up. It makes a great gift for a family member or a friend. So sign up now and get a free year of supply of vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase by visiting athleticgreens.com/Greg. Again, that's athleticgreens.com/Greg. This episode is brought to you by Form. In my opinion, Form Smart Swim Goggles are the biggest thing to hit the swimming world. With Form Smart Swim Goggles, you can see all your key metrics while you're swimming: your distance, your pace, stroke rate, and heart rate. The swim data is displayed on the goggle lens, and you can customize the display to see the key metrics that you want to see. I couldn't believe it when I first tried them. They fit like normal, comfortable goggles, and the display is there, but it's not in the way. I consciously look at the lens to see my stroke rate and my pace and my heart rate and distance. If you're a pool swimmer or an open water swimmer, I encourage you to check these goggles out. Please go to formswim.com/Greg. Again, that is formswim.com/Greg and get $15 off the Form Smart Swim Goggles at checkout, or use code GREG2021 at checkout. All right, today's guest is one of the most powerful, versatile triathletes in the world, winning major titles over the super sprint style of racing, 4 escape from Alcatraz Triathlon Championships, medaling at the Ironman 70.3 World Championships, and representing the USA at the Rio Olympic Games. He races without fear, leading out of the water almost every time he starts and forces the race to chase him. It's been a true joy to just watch him develop his craft over the years. He has no weaknesses and races with weapons across the board. His momentum is building, and he's spearheading that next generation. So welcome, and thanks for joining me on the Greg Bennett Show. Ben Kanute, how are you, mate?
Oh, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, no, you're more than welcome. I've been looking forward to this one. We lined it up before you raced 70.3 Worlds last week, sorry. And I've been I watched the race closely, and I was like, this is going to be a fun one to kind of recap that race a little bit. But before we do, mate, the last time we spoke, you were stuck at Vienna Airport trying to get home from
Yeah,
Slovakia.
you caught me just a few hours after I escaped quarantine. So that was just kind of a crazy experience overall. But thankfully, we had some good people on the ground there just helping us navigate everything. Because I mean, it seems like a lot of these countries now, if you test positive, no matter how infectious or not you are, they err on the safe side and they just shut you down potentially for 2 weeks.
How long were you there for? You weren't there. You were there for about 5 days, was it? Or
Yeah, it's just about 5. I think by the time I got home, it was about 6 days. I was Saturday night I got home and had planned on Monday night getting back. So, you know, not like the most ideal, but it could have been so much worse.
yeah, I was going to say, and also leading up to a world championship, probably not the preparation you want. Were you able to kind of still keep training there a little bit and keep your head in the game, or was it complete isolation?
I think I leveled up on Zwift a couple times as I was in there. Gained a couple levels because I just ended up doing some long and some hard rides there, and just made the most of the opportunity. So I think my wife Courtney had it hardest in
Sure.
having to take care of our daughter Briella on her own, and my daughter is always active. Not really sure where she gets that from, but doesn't really like to sleep as much. So that was Courtney was looking at me and going, "Well, you're just you're able to rest the whole time.
You
So
had
you
a
should be
holiday,
fresh."
mate. Don't you dare
Exactly.
come home and complain. You had a holiday.
Exactly. So I owe her big time after that, and then going into Worlds and everything. So we're on the reverse schedule now, and hopefully I'm able to help out a little bit more.
Oh, you're a good man. But I think this is getting repetitive on this show, but I feel like so many of the people, the athletes that I've had on this show, right at the beginning, talk about how wonderful their partner is and supportive, and really, it really goes to show, doesn't it, just how much of this is teamwork and how you have to work together, especially when you've got a young family. How old's Briella now?
She's going to be 10 months in a week or so now done. Yeah, she was born on the 4th, so she's almost 10 months old.
That's right. She was born, was it 2 days before Daytona last year?
Yeah, basically the day before. So that was a stressful time for everybody in the family, and trying to check my phone, see what the flight opportunities were, trying to make the most of the opportunity in Daytona. So that was a whirlwind.
Yeah. Were you in Daytona when she was born, or?
Yeah. So yeah, the story is she actually came 2 weeks early. So she was supposed to be due a week and a half after Daytona.
Oh,
And we're
Briella, come
sitting
on.
there. I know. She's showing me who's boss early on. But yeah, we're sitting there and we made a decision as a family, like, hey, Daytona, it's one of the only races. It's a championship. It's just a great opportunity. And we felt like we had enough time. And kind of looking back, hindsight's 2020, but Courtney started to experience some labor pains or contractions kind of the night before I was supposed to leave. And we called multiple doctors, and everybody just said, nah, you're way too early. That's fake labor. Like the Braxton Hicks. So there's even like another step before it. And they're like, you don't need to go in unless you're like 5 minutes apart.
Yeah.
And so I left. And basically, I think as I touched down, she's like on the phone with her parents and her family. And thankfully, like my dad went with me to Daytona and my mom was here. So there's at least somebody in Phoenix for Courtney. But yeah, and then that next day, I got a call early in the morning on Friday as I was in Daytona, and she was already in the hospital. And it was, almost like too late. And I had already cut that trip so short to try and be like, Briella, hold on for like 2 days and I'll be back. And like, after 24 hours after she was born, I was like done racing and like basically on my way home. So that was tough for sure in a lot of different ways, but all you can do is almost like look back and like laugh at it. Cause ever since then, it's like in Briella's personality to just kind of like show us who's boss in a way.
Oh, you are indebted to Courtney for the rest of your life, mate.
I know. I know. I'm paying back that one again and again as often as I can. So
yeah,
she
Courtney,
deserves.
you're listening. Everybody in the world now knows.
Yeah, I'm held accountable now. I'm not getting away from it. So she deserves like a spa month.
Oh, mate, that's awesome. Well, I know you guys are a tight unit and a really close family. And so it's great that you, well, one, were able to get back from Slovakia. Two, you got back from Daytona in time. I feel like, mate, you're always just trying to get back.
I know. It's crazy. And it's funny how that sort of stuff just always seems to collide. It's Murphy's Law, right?
Yeah, totally. Now, you'll have to excuse my voice today. I do have a little bit of a head cold, and this is one of the joys of having two kids under 4. They've had a few colds this year, and this is my first, so I can't complain. But you'll have to excuse the fact that I sound a little bit raspy today. But what I want to do today, moving on, is I really want to get to know you a little bit more. And like I said in the intro, I feel like your momentum is building, and I truly think the sky's the limit for you. I think we've just scratched the surface. I know you've had some big wins, but I think there's a lot of potential there that's still untapped. And I kind of want to look at your recent performances to start the show, and then go back and we'll look at, rewind the clock a little bit and look at your journey. And then especially I want to look at your process of how you became, well, truly one of the greats in the world of triathlon. So let's start by recapping this past weekend, Ironman 70.3 World Championships, and then we'll look at the rest of 2021 as well. So mate, 6th at the World Championships this past weekend. Solid day, overall feeling? What was it?
Yeah, I think solid is a word that I've been used to describe this weekend, kind of to everybody. I think that, I always say going into a race, if I can cross the finish line and not have anything more to give, then I can be happy with the race. And I really believe that showing up on the day, I did what I could with the legs that I had and kind of with the race, how it played out and everything. But when you cross the line, leading into the race, I knew I was capable of a top 10. I know I've been in the top 5 before and really wanted to try and compete for a podium and a win, and knew that would be, a pretty hard day overall with the quality of the field. So 6th place is good. I guess I can say I'm satisfied, but not quite. It's a little bit of you're real close to that top 5. I can smell the podium. It was a minute and a half, less than that, up the road. And I've been racing with those guys all year. So I know I had it in me, but on the day, those guys were just better. So, overall, though, I couldn't ask for much more. I had a great lead in, was feeling really good, had some great training, and finally put together a really good string of weeks of training. Had a great race at the Collins Cup, was able to make do with the quarantine and just go in feeling confident about my preparation. And then the race kind of started to play out almost how we planned it, with being able to take the lead in the swim and really just kind of feel strong throughout the race, and coming out. And I was a bit like my old self that I guess I lost a little bit mid-season, but was attacking from the exit of the swim through T1 and able to push the bike early on and make people work. And then from there, it was just kind of responding to the different race dynamics that happened on the bike and kind of weathering the storm a little bit as we got closer to Snow Canyon. And I guess the quote unquote Uber bikers and Gustav Dietliv and I'm forgetting his name right now. Got away. Yeah,
Funk?
Exactly.
Funk?
Yeah, it's Funk. Yes, that's for sure. Yeah, who was actually, I guess, riding with like a saddle that wasn't quite right, which just shows how strong he was riding too. But yeah, and then was able to kind of regroup and have a strong half marathon overall, but just it lacked that extra pop, that you need to podium at a world championship. So definitely strong, and a lot of positives to take away from it. But it's still there, that hunger where it's like you put together everything, but there's just that secondary, that outcome goal that you just, you're close to, and you just want that little bit extra.
And I guess the question now becomes, okay, how do we find that little bit extra? Because like you said, once again, incredible swim. It seemed like the first probably half hour or so, you were leading the bike or somewhat dictating the bike. And then it did tend to mix up a bit. Right. When did Gustav get away, and how did he get away? Was it like in a massive attack, or did he just sort of keep the pressure on and ride away?
Yeah, it's really interesting because I came out of the water with 4 or 5 other guys, and then I just started riding probably at the top end of my half Ironman watts just to kind of create some separation, thinking that some guys would be extra motivated and jump up to me and then kind of work together almost and just share the pacemaking. But I dangled out front at like 15 seconds, 20 seconds for a long time, a lot longer than I expected with the firepower that was behind me. And Frederick Funk was actually the first guy who caught me after that little out and back section. And he just was hammering on that. And I remember going up that first kind of major hill before we took a left on Telegraph. And we really pushed hard up that hill. It was over 400 watts for sure for a while. And there was a bit of a split. And I really thought that was going to be one of the deciding moves early on, just with how hard we pushed, and a good number of guys were kind of behind us. But with how that course rolls, I think bigger groups just go faster on the downhill, and we kind of came together then with some of those guys who were right behind. And so from there, it was about 10 people or so in that group, 20 miles in. Mm-hmm. And you kind of go through the neighborhoods a little bit. There's some climbing, but Funk was on the front, I would say, for 90% of the time. And then as we came up on that Red Sands Parkway, kind of where the run course runs up to, there's a bit of a climb before a downhill section into Falls Flat right before you take a right going into Snow Canyon. And the group, I guess, was just, there were a few gaps kind of opening, closing, but Gustav just decided to come around, and I don't even know if it was a real surge. I think it was just he wants to ride his pace and he wants to push hard. And so he went into that downhill section, and the rubber band just snapped right ahead of Sam Appleton, and Dietlef Funk and Gustav just kind of rode away. And I think the rest of us were just kind of looking at each other. Everybody was suffering between like me, Jackson Laundrie, Eric Lagerstrom, I think Backyard was in there, yep. Sam Appleton, and we were all looking at each other going like, okay, are you going to pull? Or are you going to go? Like, help. Yeah. At that point, I'm like, you know what? Like, Sam, I hope you go faster. Cause like, I'm not coming around you to do that. Like I was almost thinking at that point, I'm like, oh man, this is a hard half marathon. We got to get up Snow Canyon. But my main goal at that point, I was like, if I can just make it to this top of Snow Canyon with this group, I figured I'd be in good position because I saw Dietlef, he wasn't feeling himself before the race. Funk hadn't had the best run legs in the championship after riding super strong. And obviously with I didn't know about his saddle, but I think that played into it. And the guys around me too, I just figured I could have a good shot and I could recover a bit on the downhill, but actually ended up just kind of riding steady up Snow Canyon, letting the other guys kind of dictate it, take a bit extra risk, and was able to recover and get myself back in it a bit more before the downhill section, where I think that's a big part of where Sam Long actually got himself back into the race, besides riding up Snow Canyon, just because nobody really hammered down it, and we were all kind of thinking about the run at that point.
How did your watts change from, say, if we split it up into 3 parts, the first 30K, next 30K, next 30K, or for Americans, what is that in miles?
Yeah, I think that's about 18
miles, yeah. 18 miles, 18 miles. I mean, how
freedom units.
Did you drop off a fair bit once you got to, because Snow Canyon comes at a point where if you're getting fatigued, I remember the one time I did it, it was kind of like, it came at that point where the fatigue is just starting to raise its ugly head just a little bit. And were you able to hold your watts through there and then the downhill, or did it drop off?
Yeah, so the downhill dropped off a ton, I would say. But at that point, there were a few guys who were they were the ones who were taking it, and I was just kind of collecting myself because I knew that the gap wouldn't open up too much. But yeah, Snow Canyon, I'd say they were a little bit less than probably what I would have wanted, maybe 10 or so watts off than I would have preferred. But that was kind of just the nature of the race. I think if I had taken the time to like recover and really want to hit Snow Canyon hard, I probably could have increased my watts a bit. But with 5 other guys, I think at most you maybe would have gotten 15 to 30 seconds. And then on your own on that downhill, when you're going 50 miles an hour,
you get swamped.
You can't really get away at that point. You'd need a pretty significant gap, I think, to kind of sustain that going into transition. And I've had some of my best runs off the bike where I kind of take a second to gather myself, kind of get spin out the legs and just make sure that I'm ready for the half marathon, because there's still, an hour 10 or so of hard racing. And this is one of those courses where Snow Canyon can definitely make or break your race. But if you overdo it there, then you're going to pay for it in that first 3 miles that are all basically uphill on the run.
Yeah. I mean, the fact that you're getting to race St. George a couple of times, like earlier in the year you raced it and we can talk about that in a moment, it wasn't a highlight probably of your career in 26, but you actually got a good sense of the course by doing it. St. George is the World Championships again next year. So I guess coming off that, well, let's actually, before we go on to that, let me talk about the run a little bit, because it's not a fast run. Anybody that's done it's brutal. It's up and down, and it can really take its toll. You ran a 1:15, not near what you're capable of, but that's kind of just the type of run that it is. And like you said, you're only a minute and a half off third. Were you blown away by Gustav Eden's performance across the board? His bike and run, especially.
I don't know if I'd say blown away, because we've seen what he can do. But I would say that was particularly impressive to ride sub 2 hours there and then run, 1:11 low with walking across the finish line. So, I mean, it just shows that the level that you have to be at. And I think it shows too that you have to have a high amount of strength on the bike, especially because if you come off the bike with too tired of legs, you just can't run high enough at the level that you need to be at to win the race. And that's where I think it's really getting interesting, because some of these guys are riding super hard and super fast, but it's within their capabilities, and they're not digging deep to that level that is hurting their half marathon. So they're still riding super strong, but it's not really taking away anything. So I've raced this course like 3 times now, and I'm kind of like 2 for 3 on how it goes. And I think it's really good to be able to have this benchmark and, to have someone like Gustav win it in the way that he did, because everybody knows what it took to win this race now. And it's going to be, ratcheted up just a little bit more, I think, next year. And we've shown that this is a really hard course, and on paper with the elevation gain and everything, it doesn't look like a fast course. But I said it going in is that you can race this course really fast, actually, with, 3,000 feet of climbing on the bike. Guys still rode 2 hours and change, or sub 2 hours. And then you're running just over 1:10 or so for the half marathon with all the exchange of uphill, downhill. It's just a course, I think, that, it can sneak up on you. So if you go a little bit too hard, you don't really know how to pace it. I think then you kind of see guys start to blow up or cramp or deal with that sort of stuff. So it's being able to connect all of that and have the climbing, the descending, all of those things kind of ticked off to be able to have that race that's capable of a podium there.
I almost think of it as a stretched out Escape from Alcatraz. So you look at yourself in 6th, Eric Lagerstrom in 7th, who have both won, Escape from Alcatraz. And you kind of go, the guys that can deliver at Escape are going to be able to deliver at St. George. And looking at someone like a Sam Long, his breakthrough, he's having a massive year. I kind of look at you and Sam, as I said at the top of the show, spearheading the next generation. I kind of look at you two as the Americans that are really driving it forward consistently too. Your 4th place at, your 4th fastest time at the Collins Cup a few weeks earlier, behind Gustav Eden, Jan Frodeno, and then Daniel Bakkegaard, who you mentioned. It's like this, I feel like this energy is coming. It's the first time in a long time, And no offense to Americans listening, but as an Australian for probably 20 years, we didn't see this real firepower that's really coming both from the men and the women. I just feel like we're getting closer and closer before the next world champion, and it's going to be one of you guys. I can just sense it. Do you feel the same kind of energy?
Yeah. I mean, I've followed this sport, I guess, all my life and watched a lot of U.S. athletes come through. And I mean, like you say, an Australian for 20 years, like triathlon started in the U.S. and we haven't had a solid world champion, at least in the long distance side, for quite a while. We've had, Gwen and Katie and a lot of solid U.S. women come through. And the U.S. men have not really been slacking by any means, but we haven't had that, dominant mentality. And now I think that across the board, we're starting to see a lot more competitiveness. And it's nice to see the aggressive racing style, kind of that American, in your face a little bit, like come and get me, or, I'm coming to chase you. And that's always been how I've raced. And it's just kind of it can be, risky if you don't do it the right way, but I like that style of racing. And I think that is great to see, a lot of guys trying to vie for the top spots from the US.
Yeah. And it's been great to watch you and Sam. You guys have actually had some pretty tight battles. And I feel like you're both elevating each other. You're both taking each other to another level. And I'm just looking at the top 10 results from this 70.3 World Championships. There are 3 American men in the top 10, with yourself, Eric Lagerstrom, and Sam Long in second. And there's 3 from Denmark, with Daniel Bakkegaard, Mickey Tagholt, that was a surprise, and Magnus Ditlev in 8th. So 3 from each of those 2 countries respectively. It really is very promising.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing. And I love World Championship racing just because, the start list that you saw beforehand, I don't know if you would have predicted the top 10 the way that it came out at all, really. You would have had some players who are in there, like obviously Gustav is up there, and Bakkegaard had been shown well, Sam Long, but like there's always those guys like Mickey who just, nobody really knew who he was except for Daniel, I think. And that's what's so awesome about a race like St. George and any world championship is Jim and I always look at that beginning start list, and it's like, okay, you have all of these players, but then you could probably take away half of them due to, sickness, mechanicals, just not their day, preparation, all of that stuff. And then you probably take a few other guys who nobody's ever heard of, and you could throw them up in there too. And I always found that an interesting way to look at a start list because, it doesn't take the pressure off, but it almost makes it, somewhat manageable. Like you could even take the Collins Cup where you have 18 of arguably the best long distance guys in the business, but people came in and there are people who are struggling through the year with training, or you have a mechanical, people crashed. Like there's so much that can happen in a race, and it's just one way of kind of saying that anything can happen, and that on any given day you can have somebody standing on top of that podium.
Before we go on, I also want to give a shout out to Jackson Laundrie. His race in 5th was, I think, it was a big breakthrough race for him. And Jackson, he's been around for a while. So I was happy to see him have a solid race. I know you were charging him down towards the finishing there, but I
needed another K. One more K, and I was coming for him. But he's had an unbelievable year. He was, I think, his first kind of breakthrough. Like he had some good early season racing, but really that St. George race in May, he had a great one. He was 5th there too, I think. Yeah,
he was.
And then
the 4th. Was it 4th?
Yeah, one of those 2. And then Collins Cup too. He was able to have a great matchup and really ran strong. I think he was like 3rd fastest run split or something behind like Gustav and Jan. So yeah, it's been awesome to see, and it's fun because I think the half Ironman racing now is at some of its most competitive it's ever been.
A quick mini break to remind you of the show's incredible partners. A quick reminder to do yourself a favor and sign up to Athletic Greens. Athletic Greens also makes a great gift for any family member or friend. So sign up now and get a free year's supply of vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase by visiting athleticgreens.com/Greg. Again, that's athleticgreens.com/Greg. If you want to see all your key metrics like pace, distance, stroke rate, and heart rate while you swim, you need the Form Smart Swim goggles. Go to formswim.com/Greg. That's formswim.com/Greg and get $15 off. Or you can use code GREG2021 at checkout. If you enjoy a beer but want to keep your clarity, stay on your game, then you have to try Athletic Brewing. I was just simply blown away by how good they taste. Just a true craft beer. Go check them out at athleticbrewing.com. That's athleticbrewing.com. And use code GREG20 at checkout and receive 20% off your first beer order. Oh, I think it's almost like what we had for the non-drafting Olympic distance series, in the noughties there, with Lifetime Fitness series and the High V Triathlon. And every time we turned up, it was just full on, and you had the same kind of group of guys, going at each other. And I think that's happening more now with these 70.3s because we've had less races due to COVID. All of a sudden, we're getting such great, fields. We're not looking at, there's no more little cherry picks. It's like every time you race, you're having to race Sam Long, Lionel Sanders, Gustav Eden turns up every now and then. There's no cherry picking. You get to win one of these and you've had to have a great day.
Yeah, for sure. And I think 2020 and COVID pandemic had something to do with that, with less racing. So people aren't taking it for granted, and you can't just have a field completely spread out over the weekend where sometimes you'd have 3 or 4 half iron distance races in one weekend. And I think that there's just this kind of mentality too. And I love it, is people going for competitive racing. Like you have Sam and Lionel, and everybody wants to race the best. Like nobody just wants to go out and win a soft race. And I think that that's something that's pretty awesome to see. And it makes for some really exciting racing, especially when there's this, I think, an increase too in some of the stakes that are being put out there, whether it's Collins Cup or Daytona or a world championship like St. George. Is when you have, the right group of people, you can almost go anywhere in the world and on any course, and then you get a really exciting race.
I agree. Well said. Now, look, is there anything that you would have changed in your prep to get ready for this race before we move on looking at the rest of the year? I just want to dissect this a little bit more.
Yeah, well, and I think it's not, I could obviously say quarantine didn't really help things out much, but I would say it's more of the overall year approach. And in the past 4 years or so, my coach Jim and I have really taken kind of on a challenge of balancing super sprint, like mixed relay type stuff, and then half Ironman racing. And I think that the training plays off of each other very well. But I think the demands of ITU racing and the way that I went about it and saying, I'm a mixed relay guy, I'm not going for the individual in the Olympics. Like that doesn't interest me. I want to win a medal if I'm going back. And I saw that opportunity in the mixed relay, and I put my hand up in that way. But that pathway wasn't super clear cut overall, with discretionary picks and trying to just keep points high enough where racing opportunities were uncertain. And I think that created a lot of difficulty in planning out the season, where we might pick some key races that we would prepare for, but we weren't exactly sure if we would get on the start list or not. And that's kind of the nature of the game with ITU racing, especially if you're not going for an individual and putting in the time to collect the points and play that game. But that definitely presented its own challenges, because if you just look at 2021 for me overall, had a really strong Miami, Texas, and then I kind of had a bit of a slump that middle of the year. And it was probably a factor of just racing too much and trying to maintain sharpness, and had to spend most of the summer just rebuilding that base to get to a point where, I had 3 strong races in a row of Alcatraz, Collins Cup, and 70.3 Worlds, where I finally, felt like my aggressive self, where I pushed the small points in the races, where, I think in like Italy and Yokohama and those, I lacked the specificity in training, and I lacked that kind of extra pop that I get from these good training blocks leading into it. So we had to take the chances that we took because, winning an Olympic medal is something that's super special. And we were on that short list of guys. But it doesn't always go your way, especially with discretionary picks. And that, I think, then kind of threw things into whack. And we were playing catch up a little bit to try and get back there. So I think for 2022, I'm really excited to just, lay out my year, have some more specificity and planning, and be able to see what I can do that way.
That's a really great summary of what it takes to prepare yourself to try and to be the world champion, right? You need to stay on track. You need to stay focused. And look, there are some random athletes that seem to be able to go from one to the other, like Christian Blumenfeld, Gustav Eden, Javier Gomez always seem to be able to do it. But I always felt like for everybody else, Jan Frodeno, the rest of us, it was, okay, you want to win this kind of race, you better prepare for that kind of race. And I think that helps both physically and mentally when you kind of go in with that absolute plan of this is what I want to have and achieve. I think it's fascinating. You're now ranked 7th on the PTO World Rankings, which I believe there's a decent big payout at the end of the year. That 7th doesn't include races like Escape from Alcatraz, which I'm still not sure why the PTO can't include some shorter course racing. It's all 70.3 and higher. But you got to be impressed with that. You're pretty happy with, your position at the moment?
Yeah, I'm in an interesting position because it's going to take, a couple big races if I want to jump up at all. And then I have some guys kind of chomping at my heels, but I think being top 10 in the world in a ranking is always good. And, I've always felt like, I think the Olympics for me, that was, it's the pinnacle of our sport in a lot of ways. And that was one of the things as growing up in youth and junior triathlon, like watching the Olympics from early on, and especially triathlon then. And that was kind of the peak for me for a long time. And just with my skill set, I don't think I ever thought that I'd have the opportunity to, be a real contender for an Olympic medal. And the mixed relay offered that. But I don't know if I've ever really been on a top 10 ranking list. You can be sure as hell as I'm not on the top 10 in ITU points. I think Super League maybe, but that's like a short series. There's different ones. So, it's pretty cool, to be racing and to be comparing yourself to some of the best that have ever done the sport. And I don't take any of it for granted because I've been the guy who's been, up and coming or the underdog and chomping at the bit to pass everybody else. So I still feel like I'm kind of there, but I try and fight for every single place. And it's pretty cool to see, a little bit of validation from some of the good racing that I've had this year reflected in the PTO rankings.
Well, mate, I still think you got plenty to show us. I think this current 7th spot is a nice little pat on the back and an attaboy, way to go. But I truly believe there's even more in you. And I can see a number 1 there at some point here. How old are you now?
28.
Yeah. Okay. You haven't even hit the golden 30s yet, mate.
Exactly. I still feel like I have quite a lot too. So I'm excited for it. Each year I think in this sport, I've improved in one way or another. So I still feel like I have a lot of good years of improving ahead of me. And I'm aiming for that number 1 spot. I think that, if you're in sport and trying to be a professional, like you want to be the best, and that's what you shoot for.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, there's nothing less, mate. And I think at the end of the day, I think you've got the weapons, and I think it's just a matter of like getting the stars aligned, right? It's kind of, and I don't think you've had that season yet. I think, you've done well to make the Olympics in 2016. You won the Island House race in 2017. You've won, Alcatraz numerous times. You know how to win. And it's just going, okay, I just need a little bit more experience at this half distance, this 70.3 distance, because out of everybody in that top 10, you probably had the least amount of racing at that distance. So I think there's a lot of potential there. And, Chris McCormack and I always used to laugh that the golden 30s was when, in your 20s, you got all the speed and power and the raw passion. And then your 30s, you learn, you get that strength and that endurance and that that calmness. I think you've already got that calmness and patience. I'm not sure I had that in my 20s, but I think the things start to align a lot more in your 30s in our sport. So I think that's exciting for you going forward. But look, what I want to do now, we've sort of hashed over your year. We briefly, just talked about Challenge Miami and Texas and a few of those others. But before the show gets too far along, I figure we should get to know you a little bit better and understand how you got into the sport. And so what I like to do here at this point is just rewind the clock and just tell me, when did your passion for triathlon begin and what was that all like?
Yeah, I mean, we could go way back to the beginning. Some of my early memories. Yeah, way back. Honestly, it's like it's over 20 years ago. But in like 97-ish, 96, my dad started doing triathlon well before I did. And I remember watching him a lot as a kid and kind of not growing up in transition areas, but kind of, because we would go and travel to the races and it was a fun experience. But one of my earliest memories is watching him on Lower Wacker Drive racing the Mrs. T's triathlon, which is the Chicago Triathlon now. And that, I think, kind of got me intrigued because watching him do this, it was way different than any other sport around. And I like doing all sports. My parents put me in a number of different things. And but one thing that I think got me started and kind of stuck was joining the swim team at an early age, at age of 7, and then doing my first kids triathlon, because Chicago and especially the suburbs is just like this weird hotbed of triathlon that there was a local age group team that was big. And then a lot of them had kids, and it was just between my parents and some of the other people around, they were like, we need a kids triathlon at the local health and wellness center. And that's what gave me the first opportunity to actually hop in a race at age 8 or 9. And I just loved it. We would watch, Ironman World Champs on VHS because our next door neighbor got the channel and he'd tape it for us and then we'd watch it. And I think overall, though, it was just the community and the fact that I enjoyed the people that I was around that kept me coming back. Because I joined a kids triathlon team a couple of years later with someone who was very high performance minded. He came from a swim background, club swimming, and that's all, there's a staircase, there's a pathway to the Olympics there. And at that point in time, I think it would be, there's 1 or 2 Olympic triathlons that had gone on at that point. And he saw an opportunity that there's no system like the club swimming system for triathlon. So he's like, we're going to do that here. We're going to have some Olympians come from this group. And, we've got 2 of them now in me and Kevin McDowell. And that was where we got introduced to the draft legal triathlon. And I think really where the first kind of belief of, it was where we were first told, like, you could go to the Olympics in this, like you could do this as a job. And we were
interrupt real quick. What was his name? Who was the guy that started?
Keith Dixon.
Oh, Keith.
And then we had a number of coaches that kind of cycled through, and some I went back to, some kind of went on different directions, but he was kind of the mastermind. And then the parents were the huge support system that helped, drive bikes across the country in a U-Haul to get it to nationals. And I mean, we have just some crazy funny stories from that too, like being in Bridgeport, Connecticut as it's dark out. In Bridgeport, Connecticut is where the national champs was that year. And it's not necessarily a nice town overall, especially at night. And we were riding to the transition area in the dark with like the parents with the headlights, and there's people sitting out on their porch, like kind of like yelling at us and stuff from, staying up the whole night. Cause it was like, whatever, 4 or 5 a.m. And it was a lot of just cool experiences, I think, as a kid on that kids tri team and doing, triathlon camps out in this place, Galena, Illinois, at this guy's Keith Dixon's like farmhouse out there that he had, and just we were out in the country and riding just huge, massive hills as a kid, and like at the lake. And you find out things later on too, where we actually weren't supposed to be swimming in that lake all the time. You needed like passes, and so that we would be there early in the morning before the security guards got there. We'd do our swim, and then they'd be shooing us on our way. Like, come on, you got to get on the bike before they could actually come in and ask us for our passes.
Transition.
Yeah, exactly. So that's like the foundation. I mean, we just had a lot of fun as that team. And as I grew, like I eventually went in a different direction from that team in high school, but I was doing high school swimming and cross country. And that I think was another point in my career where I just learned how to race at that point. Like you're racing almost every weekend, whether it's in the pool or at a small cross country meet. And then there's a championship season there too. And I think that just, yeah, and racing even on club swimming throughout the entire year, there's no better way, I think, to learn how to race than to be in race situations. And you can't always do that with triathlon, especially Olympic halves. And as a kid, you just learn it in, short 30-second to 2.5-minute races. And that I think too is just something that was pretty important before, going into college, taking the pro card, all that sort of stuff.
Man, you just touched on so many great things there. Well, first and foremost, the community of triathlon. I just don't think there's a better community. I just think whether you're racing age group, whether you're involved as a volunteer or putting on events or you're racing professionally, it really is some of the greatest people you'll ever meet in our sport. So, and you touched on that when you were 7, 8, 9, just getting into it, and just the people, everybody jumping on board. And I love that, the suburbs of Chicago is where we've got 2 American Olympians have, come from. I think that's really, really cool. I didn't realize that. Kevin McDowell, big shout out.
Yeah. And it's just funny too, because I mean, that team was really close knit. And I don't think as a kid, you really realize, this is the sport that's going to take me wherever. Because I had dreams of being a right fielder in baseball too, but that dream was crushed pretty early on. And I think I had a real talk from my parents, like, do you really want to be a right fielder? But it's as you get older, I think it's always like nowadays people specialize their kids in sports so early. But what was great about what I did is I got exposed to so many different things. Like if I tried to specialize so early in baseball, I would have completely missed out on triathlon and, may have never seen the sport, but I had the opportunity to choose. And because of the people who were involved in it, I think I just kept getting drawn to it. And then there was the other aspect of being competitive, having some success and all of that. But it's interesting how you can drift toward a certain thing purely just based on, you were excited about it. And my whole family at one point was doing triathlon, and my brothers were on the tri team as well, but they had kind of different pathways too. Like my brother ended up swimming in college at a D3 school because he just enjoyed swimming more overall. He won actually the youth elite national championships and then pieced out the next year. And that was after beating like a couple solid guys too, and just retired from triathlon and went full-time swimming. So yeah, it's pretty cool overall. And it was pretty cool too, to just like have, I was friends with Kevin even before we joined the tri team. Like we were like, hey, let's go do this. Like you should come out and do this triathlon, because we were on the swim team together. And yeah, just being in a relatively small town and just having all these people kind of come together with this kind of common goal, it just kind of grows on you then. And then you're all of a sudden in this group, and then you are specialized, and then you start getting told, hey, you guys are really good. This is high performance. We're coming to win. Like, then you just kind of get that sort of mindset as well.
The pats on the back, especially during those teenage years, it's amazing the influence that can have. Not just, yes, winning races and, but when people tell you that, hey, you're pretty good at this, it's amazing. And I think they're fairly vulnerable years. We're all teenage kids, a bit insecure, trying to keep up with our peers or figure out where we fit in. And then when you have a sport like triathlon, or, like you said, you had your cross country or your swimming, it's amazing how you get those pats on the back and your self-belief grows. Suddenly you're a little bit more of a confident, teenager than you probably were beforehand. And this is where sport is just, it's so important for kids to be able to just experience it and be able to grow with it. And I love the fact that you mentioned with your swimming and cross country, you learnt to race. That was a really critical time to the greatest gift you got in those is learning how to race. And I have a side story. I never did swimming at all growing up. I was in the surf, and swimming was not really my strength. My first ever swim race I did, beyond, silly high school things, was when I was about 25. and I was already a professional athlete. I've never been more nervous on a starting line in my life diving into a 50-meter sprint race.
Yeah.
So there's something to that, isn't there? Like just getting used to that nervous energy and diving in off the blocks.
Yeah. And, I even look back at high school swimming and I'm like, oh, if I would have just approached some of this, like with some of the stuff I learned now, I'm like, oh, I would have been like, I could have gone a little bit farther, because it is like you get that reinforcement. Like I had a lot of good mentors like coming up, like especially, high school and then beyond that as well. But it's amazing some of the things you learn too. And you look back and just that competitiveness. Like I learned a lot being able to race week in, week out, how to manage energy, all of that. But then some of that, over analysis or looking too much at it and just, kind of letting go of some of that. Like I was a 500 freestyler. That was as high as it went in high school for time stuff, but the longer, the better for me.
Yeah.
And that was basically a sprint at a certain point. But, I look at that and I was like, oh man, like if I could have just talked to my younger self, I would have been like, you just got to trust a little bit more in some aspects.
Yeah.
But no, it was awesome, because it was one of those things too, where half the year times don't matter. And it's more about, getting points for your team. And when it comes down to it in a triathlon, and one of the things, like we talk about Escape from Alcatraz a few times, like the time doesn't really matter in that race because it's so different year to year. It's purely about like, can you get to the finish line first? And that I think is one of like the greatest things like about the sport and what it was all about when they first started it. Is we want to do something hard and challenging, and we want somebody, to cross the line as a winner.
Yeah. I like that. When did you realize you had some ability? Like you're getting those little pats on the back, but how old were you? And, when you started to go, hang on, this could be, did you go to college? Were you studying?
I did. I did. I guess so. The first time. Yeah. So I was never, I think it's funny now, because you look at triathlon, you look at some of these people, and everybody talks about hard work and how there's no talent. Like it's all hard work here. And I feel like I've kind of always said the same thing. And I think that all of us, like it's a little bit of time. We all have a little bit of talent, a little bit of something behind it. But for me, that kind of came more in the swim and the bike. Those just came a bit easier. And the run for me was always something that was just a little bit harder for whatever reason. And I think very early on, like I can remember distinctly the first like Iron Kids National Championship in Atlanta. The first one Kevin and I ever went to. I could hear him crossing the finish line in like fourth or fifth, and I still had half the run course still to do. Or maybe he was on the podium at that point. I don't really remember. But like you fast forward, like 2007, as like a 15-year racing as a 15-year-old. That was my first year where it was like, I can actually, like, I'm actually good at this for sure. Like I'd had some success before and improved, but like, I think I won almost every race off the front that year, except for one where I like flatted or something. And I was in high V. Like they had a lot of cool races that year. And I think around that time too was like Keith Dixon telling us, like on the pool deck, or our coach or whatever, that like, hey, imagine yourself at the Olympics. Like I don't remember exactly when it was, but I can kind of remember the place we were at, and a little bit of like, we were on bike trainers like near the pool, and they were talking about going to the Olympics. And I was kind of like, yeah, like that's what I want to do. But honestly, like the first time that I kind of figured out like what it took was after my freshman year in college. And I mean, choosing a college was a whole kind of thing in and of itself. But I, at Collegiate Nationals, had qualified for my pro card, my elite license. And my coach at the time, we were going to just not take it that year and delay it and race to learn how to win even more, like go and race age group races. And High V that year had a car they were giving away for elite amateurs.
I remember that.
I was going to go try and win a car.
It was a Mini Cooper or something, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was a Mini Cooper. Yeah. But I was approached by USA Triathlon, and they were going to have a European camp and be like, hey, you want to come out for a month, race 4 times in 4 weekends, everything from like super sprint to prelim final to sprint and Olympic distance races up to like a World Cup. And I jumped at that opportunity, and that racing in Europe gave me the first real opportunity of what it actually took to be a professional. Because I had raced junior world championships, but it was amazing to me to see these different guys week in and week out just hammering themselves. And I had some decent results there, but it was an eye opener and kind of gave me that first real sense of like, this is what it's like to be a professional. Like we have that benchmark. Now let's like work to see what could happen.
What a great experience, and good on USAT for making that happen. It's one of my big things is, the youth development or whatever they want to call it is they often miss out on the biggest thing, which is race, and go find out where the best are and race them often. And that you at least then know where that is. And for us growing up in Australia, we had the Grand Prix in 94, live television, super sprint format, much like Chris McCormack's Super League that he has going on right now. And I qualified for that as a 21-year-old. And immediately thrust against Greg Welsh, Miles Stewart, Brad, these guys were all world champions. And I knew where the benchmark was right away. And sure, I didn't beat them, but I knew where the benchmark was, and I was getting 5th and 6th and 7th. And it's like, okay. And for me, there's just nothing better than racing, especially when you're young, because I think, we've talked about that a bit already on this show, but especially in the triathlon world, it helps understanding where the playing field is. So you know how to prepare yourself.
Oh, for sure. And at the time when I was racing, especially, US racing was, I don't want to say soft, but it wasn't the same as racing internationally. Like we came up in the junior system, and we were the junior system a little bit. Like it was our team that was consistently winning the team world champs every year, or the team national champs every year, because we had the most kids, we had the best kids, and it took a while. Now I think it's maybe a bit more robust, but yeah, I agree. Like racing different places, making yourself uncomfortable, and just learning all those different experiences. Like it takes quite a bit of trial and error too, to just figure out like how the race dynamics happen, what works for me, what doesn't, like, and just, overcoming certain things.
After that trip, was that when you kind of said, okay, this is what I'm going to do? Like, this is all in now?
Yeah. And my mom and dad had a big role in, my career in just different ways. But my mom really helped me, with the college choice and going to the University of Arizona, just for a number of reasons, mainly being like no more winter so I could train outside, and just a good college university experience. But also I think after that summer, we sat down, and that was my freshman year. And after that summer, we started to understand the ITU point system. And I had gone into college with a couple credits, and we just said, like, if you take quite a bit of credits, like your sophomore year, do some extra stuff maybe over the winter, and then you could graduate in 3 years. And then that gives you a whole year to kind of focus to try and qualify for Rio. And I just applied myself that way to training, to elevating myself in that way, and then to getting school done faster than usual, to be able to give myself that extra opportunity. And it was I don't know if I'd suggest that to everybody. I think if in hindsight, like if it didn't pan out the way that it did, you can definitely like kind of take your time with school. You don't have to rush through it. But for me, it just kind of aligned in the correct way that, I finished school and was able to, really focus on training and qualifying for the Olympics, and, getting that done and going to Rio.
I'm glad it all worked out, but it is a kind of an athlete mindset, isn't it? Okay, if I'm going to do it, let's do it.
Yeah, exactly. I know. It's just like, I think in the middle of it, looking back on it, I was like, oh my God, like, why would I do that to myself? Taking like over 20 credits in one semester, like taking online calculus, which I was having one of the guys from the triathlon club, which actually ended up having a great group of guys there who ended up training with me. There were some runners there from D1 schools. And, but yeah, he was a graduate level in math, and I was trying to just finish calculus, just get through math, which I'm not very good at all.
Oh,
he's like trying to teach me how to do it, like taking it online. I'm like, oh my God, I should have just taken it in person.
It's hard enough in person, isn't it? And
yeah,
I mean, you're not tired and trying to train or, qualify for an Olympic Games and everything else. And so tell us a bit quickly then on that, that Olympic Games qualifying experience. What was that like for you?
It started off like as bad as it could for me, honestly. I graduated in 2014, and I went to live. I was being coached by kind of two people at the time, and it rotated who took the lead, but it was Adam Zuko and Ryan Bolton. And I went to actually live with Ryan Bolton in his like guest house in New Mexico after I graduated, and put in some really good training leading into the test event in 2015, and was confident, ready to go. But I think I had some external and internal pressure of, this was a course that's made for me. I should make the breakaway. It was ocean swim, one loop. The bike course was super hilly and hard, and the run was, flat along the beach. And it was expected to have a breakaway of about 8 to 10 guys with like the Brownlees pushing the pace off the front. And then that's a good opportunity. I needed a top 8 to automatically qualify, and just absolutely blew it from the very first step into the water. I think I went backwards in the swim for the first time in a long time at that point. And then on the bike, just barely made it over the first hill. Like, honestly thought about dropping out at that point, but just, and actually to bring up Kevin, we actually both kind of almost jogged in the run together at that point. We both didn't have great races there. But that kind of set me up, I think, for actually qualifying, because I stepped back from that race. I'm like, why am I preparing so well? And I just didn't race well at all, and examined everything, and started working with a sports psychologist, and just kind of reframed in my mind how to go about it, and ended up having a pretty decent race at one of the way that we qualified. It was either you automatically qualify, or it was like a points ranking system. Mm-hmm. So there were a few more races that year, and then finally in Yokohama in 2016. And I kind of had a really good breakout. I had a solid race in Stockholm, but then a breakout race a little bit at the grand final in Chicago, and just kind of went for it, and took advantage of an opportunity of people not thinking that I would run very well at all, and went off the front on the bike and just held on for like a top 20, which gave me some decent points and kind of reinvigorated me and made me think that, hey, I actually do have a shot, because I'm like, third or fourth, or I'm right on the cusp of qualifying, and just put in a lot of good training over the winter. I think I moved back to Tucson, and I kind of realized like I need a bit of balance. Like I can't be, I was living in Santa Fe in a guest house, basically, had a few good people around me there, but was basically eat, train, sleep, and just was on the verge of like, not burning out, but kind of like, this is a bit much.
Yeah, it's not enjoyable anymore.
Yeah. And so I went back to Tucson and, got in some really good training, felt confident. And I just went into Yokohama with the mindset of like, I just want to do what I'm capable of, and it's either going to happen or it's not. And if I can cross the line and empty the tank, like, this isn't going to necessarily make or break my career. There's another shot. Like I just had a much more healthy mindset, I think, and an opportunistic mindset, a positive one, rather than kind of Rio of like I have to do it. And whereas Rio, I think that people thought that I had a really good opportunity because of the course. Yokohama was the exact opposite, in that it was like the swim usually was together in wetsuit. The bike is kind of, at the time, it wasn't super hard. It was just kind of like a group riding around together. And then it was a really fast run, and nobody expected me to run very fast, but just tried to make the most of every opportunity in there, and was, playing games with myself on the bike to just make it as easy as it could be up at the front, and ended up running, super well. I had calculated out all the points where I needed to finish up, and was able to run my way onto the team when I think that everybody expected anybody else to do that besides me.
And you got to tell me that feeling, did you know when you crossed the line, or was there still points to be done, or did you know for sure you qualified?
I was pretty sure that I qualified, but like I looked for USAT staff, and like it was one of those things where like I don't know if they had calculated out the points all the way. They wanted to double check, so nobody was like, "Yeah, you did it." And I was I was like calling my parents. I'm like, "I think I did," and they're like, "I think you did," and my coach too. And didn't really want to celebrate too soon, because you never want to do that and then have to come down off of that high. But I think once I actually saw it on social media first, like on Twitter or something. I was like, okay, that's like a confirmation. Like they're not going to put that out there if I didn't do it. So it was kind of a weird happenstance that way, but still like that was super amazing to be able to like take all of that, set myself toward that goal, hit that goal of qualifying for the Olympics and being able to make it. And then from everything from that point on, like I kind of understood like how the race would kind of play out in Rio. And I was just trying to like enjoy that as much as possible.
It's a tremendous feeling when suddenly a massive goal that you've been striving for years, when you first planted that seed when you were 15 on the trainer, and then suddenly it comes to fruition. It's an incredible feeling because it's not just you. It's your mum and dad. It's your family. Everybody that's been on the journey with you. It's quite an emotional time, and I can just I went through similar kind of things as what you did. I didn't know actually in 2000. I thought I was on it. And then 2 weeks later, I found out there was a court case and I was off. And then I had 04, I made it, and that was real joy. And then in 08, I was put on the team, and I didn't even know that I wanted to be on the team. I was focused on the US non-drafting, series, big prize money races. And suddenly I'm on the team, but then Australia lost its third spot and I was off the team. So all these emotions that can go with qualifying for a team, I totally understand what you went through. Did you have a big celebration?
Yeah, you had it all. That was quite the ride itself. Like I always knew that there was like some stuff going on, but that's quite the journey. And yeah, I mean it was pretty awesome. Like I was able to celebrate a little bit, but honestly, it's kind of like it's back to work. Like it was. I think all of that training and like the hard work I put in was kind of that celebration as well. Like I finally done it. Like it was just that. For me, it was that major validation of all of the work that I've done, and just the confirmation of like, hey, I made it. Like I'm an Olympian, and that's not going to be taken away from me. I took confidence from that, and I think that me qualifying and doing that provided like that extra little bit for me to just continue on with my career too, and be able to make good decisions and just race with confidence overall.
And you mentioned a few times there, nobody expected my run. And it was fun to watch. I mean, you weren't a great runner, and now you're one of the great runners. You changed.
You're the first person who said I'm a great runner.
Well,
and I'm one of the great runners. That's great. I want to run with that. Coming from Greg Bennett.
Well, I think you're getting there. Let's put it that way. I think, are you the greatest runner in the world right now? No, but you're definitely on that. You're becoming one of those guys for somebody who wasn't, and that's
it's funny.
Transformation,
Yeah, and it's actually really funny because I've been working with Bobby McGee a whole lot, and a strength coach, and and Matt Pendola. Yeah, Bobby's fantastic. I call him the run guru.
Yeah,
he knows running super well. But to take it back to the PTO rankings, he noticed that my percent on the run is higher than my bike. I think I'm like 90% on the run, like 91 and like an 89.
I was going to say that actually. I recognized that. I was like, but I have actually noticed that that's actually become a bit of the trend. I was actually going to ask you, we're going to have to get the bike back up now because it's 98% swim, 89% bike and 91% run. You've flipped it. And so now we need to just get a few more percent back on the bike. Isn't the sport crazy? Now you go, oh, what? I got to go back to my talent. Your raw strength and talent is probably the bike, and I think that's going to be one that when you say, okay, my run's at a good spot, now I want to launch into the bike. And I think that potentially is going to be what takes you from number 7 in the world to number 1 when you squeeze that bike up a little bit more, which I don't think is going to be that hard for you. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that it's going to be hard. Interesting thing. Yeah, it's definitely an interesting thing to look at because, like, we approached 2020, I think, probably a bit differently than some of the other people in the world, and we took a look at first. It was trying to stay ready for qualifying for the Olympics, all these different races, but then it turned into this is probably the one time in my career at all that I don't have to be race ready. I don't have to maintain race readiness in the swim and the bike throughout the entire year and then balance improving the run. I could focus a lot on the run and get that improved. And so I put in a lot of work in it was difficult. I mean, I was in the heat of the summer in Phoenix because we basically stayed here for most of it. And I think that it didn't get to quite show in 2020 as much, like the sort of work that we were doing because of the lack of swim and bike training. And then only in 2021, I think we started to see some of that where my swim and bike are at least at a level where it allows me to express my run. And in balancing some of that ITU and half Ironman racing, like, again, it kind of, threw kind of a wrench in there. But I think for the first time in my life in a longer distance race, something 10K or over, I'm finishing super, super strong at the end after running pretty consistent and steady. And that's usually something that, you'd see in my super sprint racing with sprint finishes rather than, half Ironman racing, and just trying to hold on till the end. And you could look at Chattanooga in 2017 where, when Gomez passes me, I look like I'm kind of wobbling or, waddling down the road. And now when I run, it's at least much more efficient. It's not quite there exactly where I want it to be, but it's going in the right direction of improvement. And that bike and swim, after taking, a break from it, I think it's come back a little bit slower than we would have liked or maybe thought, because it's always kind of snapped right back into it. But we've definitely seen a steady progression throughout this year, and a lot of positives in training that indicate, I think with a little bit more tweaking, like that should be something hopefully for 2022 that we're getting a more complete package overall.
Well, I'm excited for you. When I saw those numbers, I was like, because I do think in your DNA at your talent level, the bike is the one that it might be a bit slow this year, but I still think when I look at the next couple of years and, you've been working on mitigating your weaknesses, but I think this next block is almost like, okay, play to my strengths even more. And that's when I think the magic will really happen. That's just my personal view, and take it or leave it, but that's what I think. And I mean, how are you going to, let's talk about your physical training a little bit at the moment. What specific kind of swim, bike and run workouts are some of your favorites to get yourself moving? Do you have any sort of favorite workouts that you can share with, or even better still, what I like on this show is when people share some incredible workouts they've done, and you don't have to be humble, because I like to hear some of your swim workouts and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a lot of different things in there. I think one of the things that I'm excited about is just laying a thicker base down and just getting that endurance and strength up, because with the timeline we've kind of had to rush that. And I think that's kind of where, in 70.3 worlds, where I'm at the front, and for the first time in a little while, that gap is maintaining. I think that there is an opportunity there with the right amount of bike strength to keep that gap and to force people to split the group early to either catch me or let me go, kind of like what happened in Chattanooga in 2017. As far as swim workouts, let's see. I mean, I like to pull a lot of them. There's different ones. There's a solid one, just a test set of 100, 500. I always think that that's a pretty good indication of swim fitness, at least get out speed. It's kind of a standardized test of doing 100 all out, resting for a minute, and then doing a 500 for time. And I know I'm in shape for sure if I'm like 52-ish, give or take, for the 100 in short course yards.
I was
and then I could swim. Yeah. Long course meters, just 52. No, and then like a low 450 for the 500. I mean, there's no one real specific swim workout that I like. I know that one of the ones that I always like to draw on that, I don't always go back to this, but every so often, if Jim is like, hey, you really need a super hard swim, I've offered up in high school swimming, we would do a 100, 200, 300, 400, but each interval, the seconds stay the same. So it'd be like 110, 210, 310, 410. And you're trying to go best average for all of that. And you can do that like multiple times through. That was one that in college a lot, that I would know, like, hey, if I hit certain times here, which honestly, I think if I was just around like 00, that's kind of my standard. I think if you can hold 00 consistently and have like a bit of get out speed, I feel like you could be toward the front of most swims. And obviously there are some people like Varga and stuff who just will crush that sort of stuff. But
for your 70.3 world that you're in now, I mean, how much swimming are you actually doing? Are you able to back that off and focus a bit more on the bike and run? Or do you still have to, I mean, obviously the heart and lungs know no difference. So if you're economical in the swimming, it's a good way to train no matter what. But how are you managing that with the bike and the run?
It's an ebb and a flow because I've gone through periods of less swimming and can ride on some of my swim fitness. And then there's periods where I have to kind of rebuild and keep the strength. And honestly, that's what we did kind of the past couple months, is make sure that I got in enough swim volume. And I don't think I do more than 20,000 yards a week. So I'm not like a high volume. I don't have to specifically work at it, but I make sure I get in like some 5K swims and then some fast stuff. But that's one thing that I think is interesting to look at for 70.3, because if you can like treat it almost like an ITU swim where you can get out fast and then sustain, the gaps don't ever really close in a swim. So if you establish that gap, if anything, it's just going to open up bigger, and it's establishing it that fast enough. And that, I think, is the balance of, you don't want to have to spend all your time developing get out speed and swim strength, because at the end of the day, you're not going to win the race on the swim. But I love making people lose their race in the swim. Like, I hate when people are like, oh, the swim doesn't matter. Like, it's a triathlon. It matters. Like, the Gustav Iden, like, he won that race because of how his swim was good. Like, he was close enough. Like, same thing. Christian Blumenfeld was in the race because he was there. And Sam Long, even, like, he swam well for him. He kept that gap close enough. But throughout my career, like, there have been times where I throw out 2017 in Chattanooga quite a bit because I was able to podium there, but also because that's like where opportunity just met like my current fitness, and people didn't really know who I was. And I took advantage of my swim ability and the fact that everybody thought I was going to run 120 or over on that and just come back to me, and just with them watching each other. So that's the sort of stuff that I love about racing, is if you can get out fast, it's a small thing, but it could turn into something big.
Oh, no, you need to have, I agree with you. Triathlon's unusual like that. It has nothing to do with pacing and doing your best 1500 in the, or what, 1.9K, whatever it is, in the swim. It's about making the gaps at the right time. And if you've got that explosive power, you better be using it and opening that gap. With the bike, are you using a lot of data? Are you somebody who's riding to watts, or do you ride by feel in a race? Are you guys, because I think, I spoke with your coach, Jim Vance, a while ago. We were just having a chat and we were talking about data and that kind of thing. You guys use a little bit of that, and actually on the run as well. I think I heard you you look at your run power as well.
Yeah, Jim is big on data, especially he's good at analyzing it, and we like to collect the data, but it's really used to provide confidence on the start line. So we collect it, we use it, and then we apply it there to give us confidence to say, hey, if I just do what I'm capable of, like, I'm going to have a great race. So we do basically all of our riding by power. It's not always a sign. Like, if it's an easy ride, it's not like you have to ride this. But for all of the hard intervals, I have a sort of range to stay in. And our go-to set before a half Ironman in most of my world's lead-ups, and this was kind of tweaked going into St. George, because each 70.3 World Championship, the course kind of had different dynamics, but overall it was based on strength. Chattanooga and St. George are similar in the fact that Chattanooga had about a 10-minute climb, 15-minute climb at the very beginning. And St. George had, quite a bit of undulation with that 15-minute climb coming at the end. So we just went more specific with this and breaking up how we thought the power might go along. But 4 by 30 minutes is pretty much with like just 3 to 4 minutes, maybe 5 in between each of those, is basically like a pretty standard build set into 70.3 worlds, especially. And if we were adjusting it a little bit, I think into St. George, we might have added on like an extra 15 minutes, but that was kind of broken up into like 3 by 3, 4 by 15, a 30-minute interval, and then finishing kind of harder with some other stuff. So that I think is it's a mentally draining workout in that, it's a 30-minute interval, but also it gives you a lot of confidence because you have the strength to push, at or above 70.3 pace for 2 hours, essentially, which is about what you're going to be riding, and you're doing it tired based on other stuff. So that's one that we usually head back to, and we'll base anything else around.
And that's a good one, I guess, to use for practicing some fueling that you might want to get used to as well.
Exactly. Yeah. It's almost like a race sim. And that kind of leads into the run too, where we've done a lot of kind of tempo, or even we call it thrempo work, where it's like in between threshold and tempo, especially for some of this faster stuff, like when we were training for Daytona. But it's like 5 by 10 minutes or 6 by 10, or we're doing, stuff that's broken up, but you're running at pace and, taking in some fuel. And it's basically the training reflects some of the racing out there without absolutely breaking you down. And I imagine that, going into 2022, we're just going to be taking those kind of base workouts that we have and just throwing them into slightly more specific St. George workouts where we know kind of the demands of the course and how that affected the race. So we'll just be prepared for those kind of key decisive moments.
I like that. Now, you mentioned, I mentioned, but I saw it earlier, that you use power for running.
Yeah.
I didn't even know any of this, so you have to excuse my ignorance. But how is that used? You're able to see your flight off the ground or power into the ground? What is that?
Yeah. So it shows up the same way that kind of a bike power would. Like you read it in watts, it's whatever, 360. I can use an example of St. George. So 360 was my average throughout the whole thing. And honestly, that number on its own doesn't mean anything. We took, each year we've just accumulated all of the workouts and we kind of know. And each year my power's kind of risen. So like back in in Chattanooga, I was running, 320 or so overall. We just didn't want to go over 340 because that was kind of what we saw in the workouts that did that. And with any sort of like kind of weight fluctuations and that, it's essentially like an efficiency meter. So if you can sustain that, like if you lose your form, you can see the watts go up. And there's also something in there called leg spring stiffness that also the power meter reads. And as that goes up, it's kind of like your reaction off the ground, kind of how it bounces off. So we kind of take a look at all of those. And I use the race power essentially just as I know about how many watts equates to a 5-minute mile or a 5:20 mile or what I can do for a tempo run. And I use that to just help with pacing kind of early on. So in St. George, as I'm running up that first, 2.5 miles that are all basically uphill, I can look down at my watch and I know what I did in the Collins Cup, which equated to like a 5:25 mile or something like that. And my watts are higher going up that hill. I know I'm at least in a good spot overall for what these other guys are having to push. So I think up that first 2.5 miles, I was at about like a 5-minute effort pace, give or take. And that just kind of, it gives confidence in like, hey, like if these guys are running ahead of me, I can kind of take some solace in the fact that they could potentially come back because this is pretty intense for a half marathon. Nobody except for maybe Jan and Gustav have run 5 minutes and change for a half marathon. And that's kind of what happened in Texas, in that I ran my pace, and even Miami. And I was like, this is what I'm capable of. I know that. And as I got later in the race, the mileage becomes a little bit easier to wrap your brain around. And I started taking more risk. And as, maybe some other people are just holding on, I'm able to pick up the pace. So it's just kind of helped with that, where I'm not somebody who running just intuitively, I can just hit that 5-minute pace all the time. Maybe on the bike, I can maybe know exactly what about 300 watts feels like, but I don't know if I have that exact runner's intuition all the time with the pace. So it just kind of helps provide that extra little bit of reliability.
That's awesome. So what is the measuring device that actually does it?
There's a number of them out there. The one that I've used is just Stride, and it's just a foot pod. Yeah.
I've heard
there's a number of them. There's some that sit on the side of your shoe, in the laces, in the like in the sole itself. And honestly, like I think any of those, it's a little bit like heart rate in a way too. It's just you want to spend a period of time collecting the data and understanding what it means and kind of creating those zones. And then you can kind of say, okay, I've seen these trends. Like, this is now how I can approach like a race plan with it and kind of go from there.
I love that. I love that you're looking at that. It's one of those things I wish I had. Do you know what I mean? It's that new technology. Any professional, I'm surprised, wouldn't be. I mean, don't get me wrong. There'll be times I'll be wanting to rip it off and not look at it. Having an emotional breakdown. But because sometimes I find like that data can dictate you a little bit more. And I was probably more of a free feeling athlete and would just go off emotion a little bit more. But I also understands the true benefits of it to optimize your performance on a race day. So I get it. Mate, there's so many more things I want to discuss here with you, but I'm going to have to move on to finish with a few questions. Can we do that?
Yeah, of course.
All right. Well, let's start with let's do these fun rapid fire. Well, they're not that fun, but here we go. Can you do 10 rapid fire questions?
All right. I'm usually not very rapid with rapid fire, but I'll give it a shot.
Some of these aren't that rapid, actually.
Yeah.
All right. This one is, because you probably already know the answer. Out of 10, how cool would you say you are?
We're just going to go 10 out of 10.
There we go.
Cool. My wife might have a different answer than me, but
I reckon you are. I reckon you're one of the coolest guys in the sport right now.
I think I've developed a bit of like the dad dorkiness, just a little bit. Maybe I always had it, but Briella just, brings it out in me.
She does. Yeah, but that makes you cool. Don't you understand?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. She's always going to think that, right? Super cool.
Exactly. All right. Outside of triathlon, if you could choose to do anything for a day, what would it be?
Oh, that's a good idea. It's basically anything outdoors, camping, surfing, just anything, depending on where I am in the country, I guess.
Nice. Okay, that'll do. Which would you rather do? Wash dishes, mow the lawn, clean the bathroom, or vacuum the house?
Can I list in the order that my wife would want me to do them? No.
I have no choice in the matter, Greg.
I'm going to mow the lawn because I have artificial turf. So that's a perfect one right there. Spend the time sitting in my recovery boots.
The lawn, leave me alone.
Yeah. Get one of those manual mowers and just do laps around.
Yeah. I can't help in the house right now. I'm mowing the lawn. All right. Who would you want to play you in a movie of your life?
Oh, I don't know. Can I answer the question with a question? Do you have what actor would you say resembles me the most?
Oh, that's a good question. I didn't realize it was going to be thrown back at me. Well, who's somebody really good looking, super cool, very athletic?
Yeah, there's nobody like me.
There's nobody like me. There we go.
I don't know. Ryan Reynolds seems like a cool guy.
There you go. I like Ryan Reynolds too. I like that one. For me, I like. Did you see the show on Netflix, Peaky Blinders?
Yeah.
I really like that Cillian Murphy. The main character.
I love that show. Yeah,
very lean guy. Yeah. So anyway, that's who I'd want to play me. Anyway, what dinner could you prepare that's very special?
I'd say anything barbecue. I got real into, the pandemic. We had our wedding, had a grill. So I got into kind of smoking different stuff. So like a brisket or something like that.
I love all of that. Love it. That's one of my favorite things about the US is that barbecue type food, the brisket type stuff.
Yeah.
All right. Here's another one on that. 3 guests, non-family, you would invite to that barbecue.
Oh, these questions, I don't always have somebody who's on the list, but just, I guess anybody who's like at top of their game. I was I knew something like this would maybe be coming, but so I was kind of thinking someone like Mike Tyson. Let's just throw out The Rock, and then
good one.
The third one, honestly, it could be dealer's choice. I'm not super picky when it comes to this. Just someone along those lines who's kind of like top of their game.
Fair enough. Well, if you can't find anyone on top of the game, I'm more than happy to take this.
Yeah, you come on. You can. Yeah, we'll have some great stories then. That'll be great.
All right. What is your favorite thing about your career?
Oh, I think my wife. Honestly, she's going to keep coming up in this, but the best thing to come out of the Olympics was her and the life that we created after it. So I'd say like from that's even like all of the places that we've traveled, things that we've gotten to do. honestly, triathlon's been super good to me. So that's, yeah.
You and me both, mate. To walk away with a few victories, have a professional athletic career, and get a beautiful wife out of it, we're very lucky men.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a lovely shout out to Courtney. So good on you. What motivates you to work hard?
You talked a little bit about the calmness, but I think it's that pursuit of perfection. Almost, there's those races where you want everything to come together, where it just flows. You come close, and I think I've had a couple that are nearly there, but just where everything clicks, and it might not be perfect overall. There's obviously going to be stuff that goes wrong, but where you're just in that flow, you're racing, you're in the moment, and then the result follows as well. And it's that just alignment of the stars. I think that, whether, even if it's, sometimes it's a training day, but just, that's what you kind of look for. That's why we keep going back. That's why you weather all the bad days, is you're trying to find that kind of perfect moment.
God, that's a great answer. Chicks in my high state of flow. Find that. Yeah. And I think as professional athletes, you're always searching for it, and triathlon is very hard to find it. And I think I did probably 500 plus races, and I think I probably touched on it, nudged on it maybe 5 times. It was like, oh, that was a race from start to finish, or a training. I think I got it more in training, but
yeah,
when it happens on a race day, that's special. All right. Greatest movie of all time.
Top Gun. Rapid fire.
Now that's rapid fire.
That's rapid fire. I gotta have that one unpacked. There's a lot of movies out there, but what's one that has, fighter jets, romance, all of it? Top Gun's got a little bit of everything for everyone.
Oh, that's brilliant. I love it. All right. What is one of the best or most worthwhile investments you've made ever? And that could be investing in money, time, energy, relationships.
That's a tough one. I haven't really thought about that.
Well, you already gave the answer.
I would say,
mate.
Yeah.
You already gave the answer.
Yeah. I really think, I think people undervalue their time, because there's a point in time too where you have a lot of stuff going on, and you really want to make the most of whatever your priorities are, like family, training, like all of that stuff. And I think time, is kind of the most precious investment in how you spend it that you can do.
I like that. I saw a quote the other day. It said, if you could give your life up now for an 80-year-old with $100 million and you had to swap your life, would you take it? Now, I think very few people are going to say, yes, I'll be 80 and $100 million. And it really gives perspective on understanding actually time is the most valuable asset you have. Yeah. And how you manage it. All right. Which decade of music is best?
I'm the worst person to ask for that. You can look at my Spotify and I'm all over the place. I'm going to go with early 2000s, back to like Biggie Smalls and that era of like 90s, early 2000s rap.
Wow. And we were getting along so well.
I know.
Oh, dear me.
People would really disagree with that, but that's okay. I'm not the music expert. That's the other half of my family. That's my brothers. They're maybe everybody will get along better with them. They'll come and listen. I don't have any records at my house. You're not musically inclined. Maybe my 10 out of 10 coolness just went down a couple.
It did a little bit, actually. Yeah, I think I'm going to have to bring you down to a 9.5. Yeah. You've mentioned your brothers. Are they older or younger than you?
Younger, both younger.
Okay, so you got 2 younger brothers. Good on them. Are they doing anything to do with sport now, or they sort of shifted on?
They dabble a little bit. One of my brothers actually, when he went to swimming college, he does swims. Like, he's really into hiking and kind of explore riding around Seattle, and he hikes and then swims like up at the glacier lakes that are up at the top of the hikes and stuff.
Oh,
so yeah, he's into that sort of stuff, which is pretty cool.
That's cool. All right, mate. Well, let's finish with 2 big questions. All right, can we do that?
Yeah.
Here we go. What is one tip you have for people on how to optimize their life?
Yeah, I would say optimizing life. That's I think it goes back to the time.
Yeah, I think he's already answered that. As I read it, he's already answered that.
Yeah,
I think
that's the hardest thing. I think is just knowing how to spend your time.
Managing your time. It's a worthy tool. All right. If you could sit and have a coffee with any living person, who would it be and why?
Yeah, this goes back to the dinner one. And you know what I thought of too? I'll answer this, but I'm assuming most people answer this in, people who are inspiring, who have been through a lot, accomplished a lot. And honestly, I'm not super picky. I think anybody like that, kind of like your podcast, is just interesting to talk to. Mm-hmm. But how many people do you think kind of go the opposite direction? Like, have you ever watched the Netflix show Mindhunter about the FBI agents who interview serial killers?
Yes.
How many people do you think would want to go and interview somebody like that just out of like kind of morbid curiosity almost? And that's the person they'd have a cup of coffee with.
Well, I haven't had anybody yet, but
yeah, exactly. Yeah. I'm not going to start. That's not going to be me. But I'm going to go back. I actually think Mike Tyson would be super cool to talk to. It would change probably next week if he asked me, but like just his kind of polar opposite personalities of like the ferocity in the boxing ring of like coming to a point almost where like he doesn't want to go back because of how like unleashing the beast, like of how intense he was, to being like, raising racing pigeons and just like being this like gentle, like seemingly, I don't know the guy, but like really nice person that, people say good things about. Like there's that polar opposite that I think is like somebody who just turned it on and could be like the best, one of the best ever. And then kind of step back and just be, kind of the opposite he was in the ring. That's kind of an interesting dynamic, I think.
It is, isn't it? To be so ferocious.
Yeah.
To then be somebody with pigeons. That is incredible. All right. Well, that'll be an interesting coffee time.
Yeah,
we'll have to set that one up for you. All right, mate. What's next? What do you got going on now? Now you've got 3 worlds done. What's happening the rest of the year?
I'm just coming off of a pretty chill week, and then I'm looking at the LA Tri and then Oceanside 70.3 double. And after that, the only race that's really catching my eye on the calendar would be Clash Daytona at the end of the year. Mm-hmm. So those are kind of the 3. And then it's really just figuring out like what would be best for me when the break is and when to, build into 2022 and hopefully enjoying the holidays and everything.
Oh, well, good, man. This has been really fantastic, Ben. I really enjoyed this. And you've given so much of your knowledge on this one. I didn't even have to pry too much. You were very forthcoming, and I really appreciate that. And I'm sure all the listeners do as well. So, mate, thanks so much for coming on the show, and really appreciate it.
Thanks. Yeah, I enjoyed it as well.
Yeah, brilliant, mate. And I have to have you back because I think there's so many more. I had to skip over a fair bit here, but, I wanted to talk to you more about some of your mental strategies and things like that because I know that's been important to you. But we're going to have to wait till next time because this show has been a bit longer, and I appreciate everybody for listening because some of these were just fantastic. Your stories and everything were fantastic. So everybody, thanks for listening. You can find the show notes and timestamps and links and coupon codes at bennettendurance.com/media. Thanks again, everybody, for listening, and thank you, Ben.
Thanks a lot for listening to Be With Champions. If you enjoyed the show, your support would truly be appreciated. You can visit the Be With Champions Patreon page, or you can subscribe with your podcast app of choice. Don't miss the next episode, so subscribe and be notified. For show notes, if you want to know more, please visit bennettendurance.com. I'm Phil Liggett, and on behalf of Greg Bennett, here's to the next time, and I hope you will join Greg again very soon.